Support this podcast via our Patreon and get more writerly goodness. Visit patreon.com/nanocast to join up.
Welcome to NaNoWriMo Every Month. My name is J. Daniel Sawyer. I'm the author of some 20 books, 34 short stories, and numerous articles and other things, and I am your guide on this journey to use NaNoWriMo to level up to professional output levels. It's day 21. We need to talk about your relationship with your character. You've written your character because there's something about them that you identify with, perhaps, or that you're curious about, that you want to explore. They have a journey that you want to relate, a story that you want to tell. As you're sitting there at the keyboard, no matter how different your character is from you, you're kind of living through their eyes. You're trying to inhabit their perspective and communicate the world that they're in as seen through their eyes to your audience. Your main character is your conduit to the whole story. Because of this, it's tempting to try to have, a healthy relationship with the character. You want to respect them, you want to treat them right, you want them to win in the end. And that's all well and good, but it doesn't really usually make for good fiction. Your job as a writer is to kick your character while they're down, and I really, really mean it. The crueler you are, the more unrelentingly abusive you are to your character through the events in your world, the better your story's going to wind up being. That's particularly important here as we're in the final stages of your book, but it's important throughout the whole book, and I'll give you an excellent example. The Indiana Jones movies, particularly the first three, and particularly the first one, they've got some interesting stuff in common that's present in most genre fiction, but tends to be hidden a little bit, and it comes right out and floats on top and makes faces at you in the Indiana Jones films, which is why this is a very good example. In Raiders of the Lost Ark, you have Indiana Jones, your dashing, swashbuckling, whip-wielding, hat-wearing hero. He fights Nazis, he raids tombs, he finds ancient artifacts, he makes daring escapes, and he never wins. And I mean that really. Not even in the end does he win. And that's true for all of the Indiana Jones adventures, except for the Temple of Doom. He kind of wins a little bit at the end, which actually sets it apart. It's one of the reasons the Temple of Doom is not quite as good as the other films in terms of just raw story and adventure power. Indiana Jones never wins. He goes from one startling defeat to another, always just barely hanging onto his skin, never getting what he was looking for, and in the rare occasion that he does, like when he manages to capture the Ark of the Covenant, he doesn't get it because he was clever and captured the Ark of the Covenant. He gets it because the Ark of the Covenant kills everybody else, and then he takes it home, and the people that financed his journey, they take the Ark and file it away. The thing that he cares about, he wants it to be in a museum, which is his clarion call throughout the series, it doesn't wind up in a museum. Indiana Jones never wins in the ways that he wants to. He does wind up with Marion at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is no small feat because she is every inch his equal, and it's wonderful when that happens in a story. But that's about it. That's his little moment of victory. Everything else, he's screwed. He goes from having the idol stolen from him in the temple at the beginning, to regaining it, to having it stolen from him again by Belloc when he never gets it back, to going to Nepal and trying to get the headpiece for the Staff of Ra, which is thwarted by the Nazis, and he winds up acquiring a partner that hates him and that he doesn't want, goes to Cairo, gets shanghaied in the streets, the partner gets kidnapped and apparently killed, then he's shanghaied and taken to be killed and only narrowly rescued by a friend. Then through another series of adventures he finds the Ark of the Covenant and is locked in the tomb with it while it's taken away. He escapes from there only to have the hell beat out of him by a gigantic hulking Nazi in a fistfight who he defeats through ducking. Then winds up in a cross-country chase across the desert to try to catch the Nazis before they fly the Ark of the Covenant out. He catches it only to get shanghaied again. Every step of the way, even the minor successes, he gets the hell beat out of him. He's walking pile of injuries. He's miserable. Every step of the way, he's just not having much fun. And yet, watching it is one of the most exhilarating and enduring action-adventure movies in the history of film. And it's because the character suffers. He suffers every way imaginable. His friends are kidnapped and apparently killed. His rivals lord it over him and humiliate him in public. He gets shot, kicked, punched in his bullet wounds, thrown out of moving cars, locked in inescapable tombs, and finally tied to a stake while the apocalypse gets unleashed all around him. And the only reason he survives is he's able to not look at the box. This is not the sort of resume we think of when we think of a hero, but it actually is the sort of dynamic that underlies all stories in which there is a hero who we follow. That means basically anything aside from a literary fiction story, which is fiction about people who are losers rather than people who are winners. And the difference is basically in their attitude. In literary fiction, the main character suffers, but they don't really try to do much about it. And anything they do try to do is ultimately completely futile. Whereas in genre fiction, the heroes suffer, they sometimes suffer a good deal more, but they either have some kind of resilience about them that gets them to continue to keep trying, or they win in the end even a very small victory. And literary fiction definitely has its place, but even in literary fiction, this maxim holds true. You have to torture your character. Your relationship to your character is like the relationship of a taskmaster to a slave, or a Soviet interrogator to a prisoner of the KGB. Your job is to make that character's life hell. You want to make them as miserable as possible. You want to pile on all the hurt and failure and humiliation in the world, because the more reverses they have to conquer, the more heroic they are when they finally do, and the more satisfying your story is. Readers don't read stories to watch the main characters win. They read stories to watch the main characters suffer. Not usually in a schadenfreude type of sense, but because most of life is either boring or difficult. And for a reader to identify with your character's journey and to enjoy your character's journey, their character has to be going through something that they can sink their teeth into. And no matter whether your character is a tomb raiding archaeologist, or a supernova surfing stuntman, or a socialite who finds a body in the library, their struggle is the thing that makes them identifiable. They don't have to look like, or be like, or sound like, or think like your readers do. In fact, the fact that they won't is one of the things that readers go for. Readers love characters that are different from them inside out, because it gives them a break from the drudgery of normal life. But they have to be able to sink their teeth into the fact that this person whose eyes I'm seeing this story through, they are hurting and struggling and trying their best, and God, I know what that's like, and boy, I hope they win. That's what gets them involved in the whole story. I know I don't swear much on this particular podcast, and it is rated for a general audience, but there is really only one way to say it. You've got to be the world's most evil fucking asshole to your characters, and torture them half to death, or 3/4 or 90% of the way to death, so that their struggle has meaning. The meaning in your character's struggle comes from how much they suffer to get what they're trying to win. Their prize is made valuable by the extent of the suffering they go through to win it. Torture your characters, be evil to them, and don't worry about whether or not they're going to like you in the morning. Because the morning happens at the end of the story when they finally win, or when they lose in a way that they don't mind so much. I'll see you tomorrow. NaNoWriMo Every Month is written and presented by J. Daniel Sawyer and produced by Artistic Whispers Productions. Visit our website at NaNoWriMoEveryMonth.com and leave a tip in the tip jar to support this podcast. NaNoWriMo Every Month is copyright 2015 by J. Daniel Sawyer and Artistic Whispers Productions and released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license.